Hey guys! Tonight we begin with something that has haunted human imagination for centuries. We're talking about cursed medieval treasures and lost artifacts. A world where gold gleamed in candlelight. A world where objects held power beyond their material worth. A world where the pursuit of wealth came with a price that could never truly be paid. Before we get comfortable, take a moment to like and subscribe if you're into deep, slow historical exploration. Now, dim the lights. Settle into whatever makes you comfortable. Your bed, your couch, that chair that has supported your body through countless nights. Feel your body becoming heavier with each breath. Take a slow breath in through your nose. Hold it for a moment. Hold it. Hold it.
Now let it out gently through your mouth. Good. Again. In slowly, out slowly. Feel the air moving through your body. Feel your chest rising and falling, your shoulders relaxing with each exhale.
Silent confessions, secrets that were never meant to be spoken aloud. The walls are old, very old. The stone is rough beneath your fingers if you touch it. Gray stone, cold stone, stone that has been here for 300 years. The texture of the stone is important. Notice it, the rough patches where it has crumbled slightly, the smooth patches where countless hands have touched it, worn it smooth through centuries of passage. There are crevices in the stone, small gaps where the mortar has separated from the blocks. These gaps are deep enough that your fingers can trace into them. They are dark inside, very dark. The darkness goes deep into the wall, into places where light does not reach. The monastery is quiet now.
The monks have retired to their small cells, their sparse rooms. They sleep on straw mattresses and dream whatever monks dream about. But you're not here to rest. You're here to witness something. Something that would change the course of history. Something that would be told and retold, embellished and doubted, remembered and forgotten across generations. Please like and subscribe our channel. In the scriptorium, the room where the monks spend their days copying manuscripts, there is a single candle still burning. The wax has melted almost completely, creating a small pool of liquid light that casts enormous shadows across the workspace. The shadows move like living things. They stretch and contract with each fluctuation of the flame, creating the illusion that the room itself is breathing. Watch the shadows. Watch how they shift, how they move. The candle flickers slightly, and the shadows expand. The shadows contract, expand, contract. This rhythm continues. The flame breathes. The shadows breathe with it. This is the only movement in the room. Everything else is still. Everything else is waiting.
At a wooden desk worn smooth by centuries of use, a monk named Brother Matthias sits hunched over a manuscript. His name, you would later learn, would become synonymous with disaster. His hands shake slightly. Not from age, he is only 43, but from fear.
His fingers are stained with ink the color of old blood. The quill trembles between his fingers like a small animal sensing danger. Before him lies a book that should not exist. It is a journal, written in a hand so precise it seems almost inhuman, describing in meticulous detail the locations of 5 medieval treasures. But these are not ordinary treasures. These are objects that had been cursed, hidden, forgotten, specifically because their very existence brought misfortune to anyone who possessed them. The journal itself is cursed. You can feel it simply by looking at it. There is something about the presence of the object that seems to pull at the light around it. The candlelight does not fall on the journal evenly.
There are patches of shadow around it that seem darker than they should be. Brother Matthias is copying this information. He knows he shouldn't. Every fiber of his being screams at him to stop. He has already felt the warning signs. The way candlelight seems to avoid certain corners of the room. The way the temperature drops whenever his hand touches the original manuscript. The dreams he's been having for the past 3 nights. Dreams of drowning in gold, while his lungs fill with something that tastes like rust and regret. The second candle on his desk has already burned through completely. The third one is halfway gone. This is taking longer than he anticipated. His back aches, the small of his back.
That specific place where your spine curves, that place where tension accumulates, where pain radiates downward, making his legs feel heavy and distant, as if they belong to someone else. He dips his quill into the inkwell. The quill is old. The feather has been used thousands of times. The tip has been recut dozens of times. It is still functional, still capable of making marks on parchment, but it is not a new quill. It is a quill that has been used for decades. The feather is fragile now. The barbs are worn. The quill catches on the parchment occasionally, creating small scratches that Matthias must carefully repair. Dip, scratch, dry. The rhythm is precise, exact. The quill enters the ink. It becomes dark with liquid. Then it rises.
Then it touches the parchment. Then it moves, creating letters, creating words, creating information that should not exist outside the journal. Dip, scratch, dry. This rhythm continues. Over and over. The same motion, the same pattern. The candlelight flickers. The shadows move. And Matthias continues. Copying. Always copying. His hand moving in patterns that his body knows without conscious thought. Somewhere down the corridor, another monk is awake. Brother Thomas lies in his cell, unable to sleep, his mind circling around the information that Matthias carries. Thomas knows what Matthias is doing. Thomas knows about the journal.
And Thomas is deciding, right now, in the darkness of his small room, whether to report this to the abbot or whether to let it continue. Thomas is younger, maybe 30. He came to the monastery seeking peace, seeking a life away from violence and chaos. He had lost everything in his previous life, his wife, his children, his sanity, all to a plague that the physicians couldn't name, couldn't stop. The monastery had saved him. It had given him purpose. It had given him a reason to wake up in the morning. But Thomas is also a man of ambition, something he's never fully confessed to himself. He dreams of advancement, of becoming a scholar, of having his name recorded in the annals of the monastery's history.
And he knows that whoever acts on the information in that journal first will become powerful, will become remembered. The third character is not in the monastery at all. Her name is Eleanor. She is a merchant's widow living in a town 3 days' journey away. She is 64 years old. Her hands are arthritic. The joints are swollen. Her eyesight is failing. She has perhaps 5 more years to live if God is merciful. She is also the person who sent the journal to the monastery. She is the merchant's widow who watched her husband die, watched him waste away, watched his final days consumed by nightmares and fever, all because he had once possessed one of the 5 treasures described in that journal.
Eleanor's reasoning was simple. If the journal was hidden in a monastery, if it was kept by men who had devoted their lives to spiritual matters, perhaps the curse would lose its power. Perhaps the words of monks in prayer would somehow neutralize the darkness that the objects carried. It was a desperate hope, the kind of hope that dying people cling to, knowing full well that it might be baseless. She does not know that her action has set everything in motion. She does not know that Brother Matthias is copying the information this very moment. She does not know that Brother Thomas is awake and thinking about power.
She does not know that her husband's journal will, in the coming months and years, inspire 3 different expeditions to find the 5 treasures, and that each expedition will end in tragedy. This is where our story truly begins, not with the treasures themselves, but with the moment when the information about them begins to spread. Not with the curse taking its most dramatic form, but with the quiet, almost mundane act of a monk copying words by candlelight. The medieval mind lived in constant negotiation with mystery. In this era, before science had fully mapped the world, people understood the universe as a place where the spiritual and the material were constantly intertwined.
A cursed object wasn't metaphorically dangerous. It was literally, actively dangerous, in ways that could be measured and observed. This belief system seems quaint to us now, from our modern vantage point, where we trust medicine and chemistry and the scientific method. We look back at medieval people and we think they were simple, superstitious, ignorant. But consider this. We have our own curses. We have artifacts that destroy people. We call them by different names: addiction, obsession, trauma. But the function is the same. We encounter something and it changes us in ways we didn't anticipate, in ways we can't fully control, in ways that spread to everyone around us. As we move deeper into this story, you're going to meet people, treasure hunters and monks, merchants and explorers, people driven by greed and people driven by spiritual conviction, people who cannot resist the pull of hidden things. For now, just settle deeper into wherever you are. Feel your body becoming heavier, more relaxed with each breath. The candlelight in Brother Matthias's cell is the only light in this story now. Everything else is darkness, warm, gentle, endless darkness. The monastery surrounds you, the stone walls surround you, the shadows surround you, and you are safe here, safe in the darkness, safe in the cold, safe in the knowledge that this is just a story. Just a journey through time and history and human desire. You wake in the monastery, though you're not entirely sure when you fell asleep. The transition happened gradually, so smoothly that there was no moment of conscious choosing. One moment you were listening, and the next moment you were here, present, inhabiting this space as if you belonged to it. The light is gray. Dawn is just beginning. That peculiar moment before sunrise, when the darkness hasn't fully surrendered, but the light hasn't yet claimed complete dominion. The air smells like old stone, like cold ash from extinguished fires, like the faint ghost of incense from evening prayers, a complex fragrance that your modern brain struggles to catalog.
You walk down the corridor with bare feet. Your feet are cold against the stone floor, very cold. The stone seems to absorb heat. It seems to drain warmth from your body. With each step, your feet lose more heat. The cold rises from the stone and enters your feet, and then travels up your legs. Your feet become numb. The numbness rises toward your ankles. The stone floor is uneven, not dramatically uneven, but uneven enough that you notice it. Uneven enough that your feet must adjust with each step. Some stones are slightly raised, others are slightly depressed. There are worn grooves in the stone where generations of feet have walked. These grooves are deeper in the center of the corridor, less deep at the edges.
Your feet find these grooves. Your feet know the way. The texture of the stone beneath your feet is important. Notice it, the roughness, the cold, the way it seems to pull heat from your body, the way it doesn't yield, the way it simply is, present, solid, immobile. The stone has been here for centuries. It will be here for centuries more. Your feet are temporary. The stone is permanent. The bell begins to ring. It is the call to matins, the first prayers of the day, the moment when the entire monastery awakens with a ritualistic precision that has been followed for nearly 300 years. The bell is old, cast from bronze that has accumulated the weight of countless prayers.
It hangs in a tower that sways slightly in the winter wind, swaying so imperceptibly that no one consciously notices, though everyone feels it in some deep part of their nervous system. The sound of the bell continues. Listen to it, the way it rings, the way the sound fills the monastery, the way it seems to reverberate through the stone walls, the way it penetrates into your chest. The bell rings again and again. Each ring is similar to the last, but each ring is also slightly different. The tone changes slightly. The resonance changes. The bell is aging. The bronze is changing. The bell is not quite the same as it was yesterday. The monks emerge from their cells, like shadows becoming substance. They are dressed identically.
In robes that are the color of ash, the color of earth, the color of humility. Their faces are largely obscured by the hoods that fall across their foreheads. They move with a practiced silence, though silence is not the absence of sound, it is the presence of intention. Every footstep has a purpose. Every breath is conscious, controlled. You find yourself joining them. You are flowing toward the chapel, as if you have been part of this routine for decades. Your body remembers the way, even though your mind is still half asleep, still caught between the story and this strange reality where you are simultaneously listener and participant. Brother Thomas is among the monks. You notice him because he walks differently than the others.
While most of the brothers move with a kind of peaceful resignation, Thomas walks with barely contained energy. His movements are tense. His hands, visible beneath his sleeves, are clenched into fists that he repeatedly opens and closes, over and over. Open, close, open, close. He is thinking about something. His mind is elsewhere. The chapel is cold. The cold has accumulated over centuries, seeping into the stone, becoming part of the structure itself. No amount of candlelight can fully push back this cold. The candles here are numerous, hundreds of them, flickering together in a kind of breathing rhythm. They create an underwater quality to the light, making everything seem slightly liquid, slightly uncertain.
Look at the candles. Watch them flicker. Each candle is burning separately, but together they create a unified light. The light moves, it shifts, it changes. As each candle fluctuates, the overall light changes. The whole chapel is bathed in moving light, light that is never quite still, light that is never quite the same from one moment to the next. The candlelight on the stone walls is important. Watch the light. Watch how it illuminates the surface of the stone. Watch how the stone texture becomes visible in the light, the roughness, the cracks, the places where the stone has aged, where time has left its mark. The candlelight makes these marks visible. Without the candlelight, the wall would be invisible.
In total darkness, the wall would be nothing. But with candlelight, the wall becomes something. The wall becomes present. The wall becomes real.
You kneel with the others. The wooden kneeler is hard beneath your knees, very hard. Hard enough that you can feel each individual grain. Hard enough that it creates a low-level ache, an ache that will persist for the rest of the day. This is intentional. Comfort is seen as a spiritual danger here, a subtle form of corruption that begins with softness and gradually leads to moral decay. The pain in your knees is constant. It does not decrease, it does not increase, it simply is, present. A background ache that becomes the soundtrack of your prayer. Pain and prayer intermingled, inseparable.
The pain reminds you that you are alive, that your body exists, that you are suffering. The monks begin to chant. It is Gregorian chant, the kind of music that seems to exist outside of time, outside of the normal progression of melody and rhythm. It is music designed not to entertain, but to transport, to create a state of consciousness that is neither fully awake nor fully asleep. Listen to the chant. Really listen. The sound is complex. There are multiple voices singing. Each voice is singing the same notes, but each voice is slightly different. The sound creates harmonies. The harmonies shift. They evolve. They resolve. The chant continues, over and over, the same words, the same melody.
But the experience is never quite the same. The words are in Latin. You don't speak Latin, but you understand them anyway. The way you understand things in dreams, not through conscious translation, but through a kind of direct knowing that bypasses language entirely. The chants are prayers for mercy, for guidance, for protection against unseen forces that lurk at the edges of the Christian world. Feel the vibration of the chanting in your body. The sound is not just something you hear, it is something you feel. It enters your chest and creates vibrations. It enters your bones and creates vibrations. Your entire body is vibrating with the sound of the chant. The vibration is constant, rhythmic, hypnotic.
Brother Matthias's voice is absent from the chanting. He is not in the chapel. You notice this only because you've been watching for him, waiting to see if his exhaustion from the night before has made him careless, made him risk exposure by sleeping through the morning service. But he is not here, which means something, which changes something. The absence of his voice from the chant creates a void, a space that should be filled but isn't. This void seems significant. This void seems to matter. After the service concludes, the monks move toward the refectory, the dining hall where they will take their first meal of the day. You follow, your body now almost entirely comfortable with this strange half-dream existence, where you are both observer and inhabitant, both listener and participant. The refectory smells like bread and weak ale. The ale is not for pleasure. It is safer than water. Water carries diseases and parasites. Fermentation kills the dangerous organisms. So everyone drinks beer for breakfast, including the children who live in the monastery's care. The meal is simple. There is dark bread, bread that tastes like earth, like seeds, like the patience of slow fermentation. The bread is heavy, dense, substantial. It fills your mouth with texture, with weight, with presence. Take time with the bread. Feel how it fills your mouth, how it requires chewing, how it resists your teeth. The bread is not soft. It is not easy.
It requires effort to consume. There is a thin soup made from dried beans and herbs. The beans have been soaking for hours. They have absorbed water. They have softened, but they are still dense, still substantial. The soup is warm. It warms your throat as it goes down. It warms your chest. It fills your belly with warmth. There is cheese that is hard and sharp, made from milk that was collected months ago, then preserved through salt and thyme. The cheese is almost impossible to chew. Your jaw must work hard to break it down. Your teeth must press hard. The cheese eventually gives way. It dissolves on your tongue. The flavor is complex, salty, slightly sour, earthy. There is nothing fresh. Nothing was fresh at this time of year. Everything is preserved. Everything is delayed. Everything tastes slightly of its own age, of the months that have passed since it was created. One of the monks, an elderly man named Brother Augustine, sits across from you. He eats slowly, methodically, consuming his food with the same focused attention that he brings to prayer. He does not speak. Silence is observed during meals. Instead, a young novice stands at a reading lectern and reads from the lives of the saints, stories of martyrdom and suffering, spiritual narratives meant to elevate the mind above the physical act of consumption. Augustine is 78 years old. He has been a monk for 52 years. He has seen 3 abbots come and go. He has watched the monastery expand and contract with historical currents beyond its walls. He knows, on some level, what Brother Matthias has been doing. He has noticed the long nights, the candle usage, the nervous energy. But Augustine has learned, over decades of monastic life, that some things are better left unobserved. Some secrets are safer when they remain hidden. He is thinking about death. Augustine thinks about death every day now. It is not a morbid preoccupation. It is a reasonable expectation given his age and health. He is wondering what happens in the moment of transition, whether consciousness continues or simply ceases, whether the God he has served for 52 years will greet him with kindness or judgment.
These are the questions that occupy the minds of elderly monks. These are the mysteries that their lifelong contemplation has not fully answered. Watch Augustine eat. Watch how carefully he consumes each bite. Watch how he chews thoroughly before swallowing. Watch how slowly he moves. This is not haste. This is not hunger. This is acceptance. This is surrender to the reality of his aging body. This is the reality of time passing, of life moving toward its inevitable conclusion. The meal lasts 30 minutes. The reading lasts another 15. Then the monks rise together and move toward their work assignments. Some go to the kitchen to prepare the midday meal. Some go to the library to copy manuscripts. The painstaking task of reproducing texts word by word, page by page, year after year, creating the only copies of books that will survive into future centuries. Some go to tend the monastery's garden. Even in winter there are tasks. The ground is frozen, but there are dormant plants beneath that frozen earth, root vegetables that were buried before the frost came, vegetables that will be unearthed periodically to feed the community. There is work in maintaining the composted areas, in checking the buried stores, in preparing for spring. You find yourself moving toward the kitchen, though you're not entirely sure how you arrived at this decision. Your feet carried you there, your body making choices independent of conscious thought.
The kitchen is warm. This is the only truly warm space in the monastery, the only place where heat is maintained throughout the day and night. Brother Cuthbert is the kitchen master, a large man in his 50s who has somehow maintained his bulk despite the monastery's simple diet and physically demanding lifestyle. Cuthbert's role gives him access to slightly more food than the other brothers, the cook's privilege, and he uses this privilege not for gluttony, but for survival, to maintain the physical strength that cooking for 120 monks requires. Please like and subscribe our channel. To understand cursed medieval treasures, you must first understand the tools and methods by which people sought them.
This is not just a matter of historical curiosity. The tools reveal the mindset. They reveal what people believed was possible, what they thought could be achieved through effort and planning and sacrifice. Imagine yourself in a merchant's workshop in Bruges, a city that would become famous for its wealth, its connection to the treasure trade. The year is 1352. 5 years after Brother Matthias copied the Journal of Cursed Treasures. The journal has been found, it has been duplicated, copies have circulated through hidden networks of scholars, alchemists, ambitious men hungry for wealth and glory. You are now a man named Georg. You are 34 years old. You were born in Bruges.
But you have traveled extensively throughout Europe, into the Levant, the coastal regions of the Mediterranean, where the medieval world touched the unknown world beyond. You have seen things that would seem impossible to most people. George is not a good man, but he is an honest man about his lack of goodness. He does not deceive himself about his motivations. He wants wealth, he wants power, he wants the respect that comes from possessing objects that others cannot possess, and he is willing to risk death to acquire these things. His workshop contains the tools of his trade. These are not the tools of a blacksmith or a mason. These are the tools of an explorer, a treasure seeker.
A man who makes his living by pursuing things that others have hidden or lost. There is a compass, an astrolabe that cost more than a small house. These instruments work suspiciously well, which makes George trust them deeply while understanding them not at all. He knows how to use them. The angle of the sun, the position of the stars, the way magnetic needles respond to forces he cannot see. But he does not truly comprehend how they function. This ignorance does not prevent him from trusting the instruments. Beside the navigational instruments are maps, medieval maps. These maps show coastlines and known lands, but they also show speculative regions.
Areas labeled with Latin phrases meaning, "Here be dragons," "unknown lands," "dangerous waters." The maps are partly accurate and partly fantastic, a mixture of recorded knowledge and imaginative speculation that would be laughable if the stakes weren't so high. One particular map lies on George's desk. It is not an original. It is a copy of a copy of a copy of the original journal that Brother Matthias copied so many years ago. Over the 5 years since Matthias first produced his transcript, the information has spread through a hidden network of ambitious men. Each person who has copied the information has added their own interpretations, their own corrections, their own additional speculations.
The map shows 5 locations across medieval Europe. Each location corresponds to one of the 5 cursed treasures described in the original journal. The locations are specific enough to be found, ambiguous enough to create multiple possible sites, obscure enough that success will require research, intuition, luck. Look at the map. Really look at it. The parchment is yellowed. The ink is faded in places. There are annotations in the margins, corrections written in smaller handwriting. The map has been handled so many times that there are creases in the parchment. The creases are so deep that the parchment has begun to tear along the creases. The tears are small, but they are growing, with each handling, each examination.
The map is slowly destroying itself through being used. The texture of the map is important. The parchment is rough, not smooth. It was made from animal skin that was treated and stretched and dried. The treatment was not perfect. There are imperfections in the parchment, places where the skin is thicker, places where it is thinner. Your fingers, if you touch the map, will feel these variations, will feel the history of the animal whose skin was used, will feel the imperfection of medieval craftsmanship. The first treasure is called the Crown of Mercy. It is supposedly buried somewhere in the ruins of a Roman villa in southern Gaul, now modern-day France. The crown was crafted in the 2nd century.
During a time when Christians were persecuted but not yet eradicated, it was made by a silversmith whose name was lost, forged to commemorate a bishop who was martyred in the Roman arena. The crown was cursed when the bishop's blood fell upon it, transferring his suffering, his final moments of agony, into the physical metal of the crown itself. Anyone who wore the Crown of Mercy would experience the exact sensations that the martyred bishop experienced in his final moments. The pain, the fear, the desperate prayer to a God who seemed absent and uncaring.
The curse was designed not to kill the wearer, but to inflict a kind of psychological torture. A visceral understanding of suffering that would remain lodged in the mind for the rest of one's life. Imagine the weight of the crown, the way it would sit on your head, the cold metal against your skin. The cold would penetrate into your flesh, into your bone. The weight would press down on your neck, your shoulders. Your entire body would be pulled down by the weight of the crown. Even though the crown itself is not actually that heavy, the weight would feel immense. The weight of history, the weight of suffering, the weight of the bishop's final agony. The second treasure is the mirror of reflection. It was supposedly created by an Islamic craftsman in Al-Andalus.
The medieval Islamic kingdom in what now is Spain. The mirror was perfectly crafted from polished silver, so reflective that any person who looked into it saw not their own face, but the face of the person they loved most in the world. But there was a curse attached. The longer one looked into the mirror, the more the reflection changed. The face of the loved one began to show signs of illness, of aging, of decay. And what the mirror showed was not illusion, it was prophecy. Within months of looking into the mirror of reflection, the person you loved most began to display exactly these signs. The curse was a guarantee that you would watch the death of the person you cherished.
George runs his finger across the map where the mirror of reflection is supposedly located, somewhere in the ruins of a great library in Cordoba. The medieval Islamic world was a place of learning and sophistication that Christian Europe barely understood. The technology, the knowledge, the artistic mastery that emerged from Islamic civilization seemed almost magical to Christian eyes. Feel the smoothness of the map where George's finger has traced it repeatedly. The oil from his skin has worn away the texture of the parchment. It has created a smooth patch, a shine. The map is recording the history of George's obsession. Each time he traces the location, the parchment becomes slightly more worn, slightly more polished.
Eventually, the parchment will become so worn that it tears, and the map will be destroyed, but not before George has used it countless times. The third treasure is the coin of Judas. It is supposed to be one of the 30 pieces of silver paid to Judas Iscariot for his betrayal of Jesus Christ. The coin carries the essence of betrayal. Any person who possesses it will inevitably betray the person they are closest to, will break the most important promise they have made, will commit an act of treachery that they will spend the rest of their life regretting. The fourth treasure is the saint's relic, a bone fragment supposedly belonging to a saint whose name has been lost to time. The relic was buried in a church in Calabria,
In southern Italy, but the church was destroyed by earthquakes and war, and the precise location was forgotten. The relic itself is not cursed, but its location is guarded by the curse of everyone who has ever been buried in that place, every person who died seeking it, every soul whose blood was spilled in the excavation. The fifth treasure is the Book of Names. It is supposed to be a grimoire, a magical text, created in the 13th century by a scholar whose knowledge spanned both Christian theology and Islamic philosophy and Jewish mysticism. The book contains the true names of things. In medieval belief, true names held power. If you knew the true name of something, you could command it, control it.
Use its power for your own purposes. The book is cursed because the names it contains are not merely information, they are active forces. Reading the names aloud triggers consequences. Speaking them makes things happen, and what happens is never what the reader intends. George is planning an expedition to seek the mirror of reflection. The coin of Judas is too dangerous. Betrayal is a curse that is almost impossible to control or counter. The saint's relic requires knowledge of archaeology that George does not possess. The crown of mercy would require traveling deep into France,
which is currently convulsed by the early stages of the 100 Years' War. But the mirror of reflection offers something that appeals to George's particular form of ambition. It offers knowledge. It offers the ability to see the future. And if one can see the future, one can prepare for it. One can avoid the consequences. One can use the knowledge to gain advantage over others. To seek the mirror, George will need to assemble a team. He needs men who are strong enough to dig and excavate, men who are brave enough to enter dangerous places. He needs a cartographer to confirm the locations and adjust for errors in the copies of the original map. He needs a scholar to translate any inscriptions they might find.
He needs money to pay for supplies and food and travel. George is currently gathering these resources. He is using his reputation as a merchant to acquire credit. He is promising potential team members a share of the treasure. He is preparing for a journey that will consume the next 2 years of his life and potentially result in his death or permanent disability. The work of preparation is methodical, it is repetitive, it is hypnotic. Each day brings new tasks, new challenges. There are maps to study, instruments to test, suppliers to negotiate with. The negotiations are long, they are tedious. They go nowhere and everywhere at the same time. Dip, examine, note. Dip, examine, note. This is the rhythm of George's work.
The rhythm of gathering knowledge. The rhythm of attempting to master something that cannot be mastered. The rhythm of pursuing something that will ultimately defeat him. To understand what Georg is pursuing, we must understand what these treasures represent in the medieval imagination. They are not simply valuable objects. They are concentrated expressions of human desire, human fear, human capacity for both creation and destruction. The mirror of reflection, Georg's intended target, represents the fear of love itself. In the medieval world, love was understood as a force that could destroy you as surely as any physical weapon. To love someone was to become vulnerable. To love someone was to grant them power over your happiness, your health, your sanity. Imagine the mirror as George imagines it. It is a perfectly crafted object of surpassing beauty. It is the kind of thing that a master craftsman would create only once in their lifetime, pouring all of their skill and knowledge and love into the creation of a single perfect object. To see such a mirror would be to stand before the pinnacle of human artisanal achievement. The craftsmanship would be extraordinary. The silver would be polished to an impossible smoothness. The back of the mirror would be covered with intricate engravings, designs that required months of work, designs that would never be seen. Because mirrors are meant to be looked at from the front, the back exists in darkness, but the craftsman carved it anyway, created beauty that would never be seen, created art for the sake of creation itself. The edges of the mirror would be beveled, smoothed, handled to the point that they would never cut your fingers. The frame would be secured to the mirror with a precision that seems almost impossible by medieval standards. There would be no gap between the frame and the reflective surface. The joint would be perfect, seamless, the work of a master. But the mirror also shows you the future. It shows you the inevitable aging and decay of the person you love. In a world without modern medicine, without the ability to prevent aging or cure disease, this vision is not abstract, it is intensely practical. You see the specific illness that will claim your loved one. You see the stages of their decline. You see with absolute clarity that your love will not be enough to save them. This is the curse. It is not a supernatural punishment. It is the curse of knowledge. It is the curse of foresight in a world where sight offers no ability to change what is seen. The crown of mercy is different. It is an object that was created to commemorate something sacred, but it was corrupted at the moment of its creation. The martyr's blood that fell upon it didn't sanctify it, it contaminated it. It transferred not grace, but agony. The crown would have been made by heating silver in a forge,
working it with hammer and anvil, gradually shaping it through force and heat and repeated pressure. The silversmith would have known every stage of this process, would have felt the resistance of the metal, would have understood through direct physical sensation what he was creating. Watch the silversmith work. Watch his hands moving. The hammer rises, it falls, it strikes the silver. The silver changes shape slightly. It resists, it pushes back. But gradually, over hundreds of strikes, it begins to yield. It begins to become what the silversmith intends. The hammer rises again. It falls again. The same motion, over and over. The silversmith is covered in sweat.
His face is red from the heat of the forge. His hands are burned. There are scars on his hands from previous burns, from previous work, from years of standing before the forge, shaping metal, creating beauty through force and pain. The crown is taking shape, hours of work, days of work. The silversmith is working toward something. He is creating something specific, something that he has envisioned. The crown is in his mind before it is in his hands. He sees the final product, and he is working toward it, day after day, hour after hour. And then, in a single moment, that creation was retroactively cursed. The martyr's blood that fell upon it changed everything. The meaning of the object changed, not because the object itself changed, but because of the context in which it was placed. This is something uniquely terrifying about curses in the medieval imagination. They can transform the past as well as the future. They can change the meaning of things that have already been created. The crown would now be an object that carried suffering within it, encoded into the silver at a molecular level that medieval people couldn't see but could sense. Anyone who wore it would be wearing suffering as surely as if they had worn an instrument of torture. The coin of Judas is the simplest and the most terrible of the treasures. It is simple because it requires no elaborate curse. Betrayal is inherent to it. The coin itself is innocent. It is simply money.
Metal, a medium of exchange. But it is the medium of exchange for an act of ultimate betrayal. In medieval Christian thought, Judas's betrayal of Christ was more than a political act. It was the betrayal of love, the betrayal of trust, the betrayal of the most fundamental human bond. And this betrayal was encoded into the coin, not supernaturally, but historically. This specific piece of silver was the transaction fee for the greatest betrayal in Christian history. To possess such a coin would be to hold within your hand the concentrated essence of human treachery. It is not that the coin would force you to betray. It is that you would become aware, with absolute clarity, of how easy betrayal is.
You would see every relationship as fundamentally fragile, every bond as potentially temporary. You would understand, at the deepest level, that you are capable of betraying anyone, and that anyone is capable of betraying you. The curse is not external. It is the revelation of your own capacity. Feel the weight of the coin in your hand. It is small. It is heavy. It is cold. The coldness penetrates into your palm, into your fingers. The weight seems wrong, seems greater than it should be for such a small object. The coin is dense with history, dense with betrayal, dense with the accumulated treachery of centuries. The saint's relic would have been created originally as a sacred object, a bone fragment from a holy person.
Believed to carry their spiritual power, their proximity to God, their embodiment of faith and virtue. Relics were the most sacred objects in medieval Christianity. They were kept in elaborate containers, housed in churches, visited by pilgrims seeking healing or intervention from the saint whose remains they were. But this particular relic was buried and lost. It was separated from its context, from the sacred structure that contained it, from the community that honored it. For centuries it lay hidden. The church that housed it was destroyed. The saint's name was forgotten. The relic became a thing, a bone, a physical artifact without meaning.
When people began searching for it,
They did so with the same motivation that drives all treasure seeking, the belief that a thing that is hidden must be valuable. But the relic's curse is that it brings with it the weight of everyone who died seeking it. Each failed expedition brings the curse closer to completion. Each person who bleeds on the ground where the relic lies becomes part of the relic's history. The relic accumulates curse as it accumulates searchers, accumulates blood, accumulates bodies. Eventually, someone will find it, and when they do, they will not find a sacred object.
They will find a bone that is heavy with the weight of all the blood that was spilled in its pursuit. The Book of Names is the most dangerous because it offers the illusion of control. If you possess the book, if you can read the true names of things, you believe you can command reality. You believe you can speak reality into submission. But the medieval understanding of language was different from ours. Words were not merely descriptive, they were active. To name something was to create a relationship with it. To speak the true name of something was to invite that thing's full being into the world. You were not commanding it, you were summoning it. The book would contain names like the names of angels, the names of demons.
The true names of God in various traditions. It would contain the names of diseases, the names of emotions, the names of abstract concepts like hope and despair. Speak these names aloud, and you would be invoking their power directly into your physical presence. This is why simply reading the book is dangerous. Reading it means that you have encountered these names. You have learned their sounds. Even if you do not speak them, even if you actively try not to speak them, you will find yourself speaking them at moments of extreme emotion or stress. You will find them emerging from your mouth unbidden, changing the world in ways you did not intend. These are the outputs of human fear.
These are the creations that emerge from the intersection of craft, skill, belief, and trauma. They are objects that represent the worst of human capacity to create lasting harm. And yet, people pursue them. George pursues them. Countless others before George pursued them. Countless others after George will pursue them. They pursue because the pursuit itself is meaningful. Because testing yourself against impossible odds is what gives life significance. Because there is something in the human soul that needs to struggle, that needs to strive.
That needs to believe that the impossible is possible. To understand how people came to believe in cursed treasures so completely, we must understand the apprenticeship that led to such beliefs. We must understand the moment when a person first encountered something inexplicable, something that defied rational understanding, something that suggested supernatural explanation was the only explanation available. Consider Brother Matthias, years after his initial act of copying the journal. He is now 52 years old. His hands shake more than they did in his youth. His eyes have developed cataracts from decades of copying manuscript work in dim candlelight. His back is permanently bent from years of hunching over writing desks.
But his mind remains sharp, and his mind has become obsessed with understanding what he set in motion. He has spent years reading, researching, corresponding with other monks and scholars about the 5 treasures. He has become an expert in medieval curse traditions, in the historical records of treasure seeking, in the patterns of failure and tragedy that seem to follow anyone who becomes too invested in locating these objects. Matthias's apprenticeship began long before he copied the journal. It began in his childhood, when his father died under mysterious circumstances. His father was a merchant, not a wealthy one, but a man of modest success. And then one day, his father returned home with a strange object.
A piece of jewelry that his father claimed was very old and very valuable. Matthias was 8 years old when his father brought the object into their home. He remembers the object clearly. A brooch crafted from dark metal, shaped like a crescent moon. decorated with gems that might have been rubies or might have been red glass. His father was excited about it in a way that Matthias had never seen before. His father spent hours examining the brooch, trying to determine its age and origin, attempting to discover who had crafted it. But other people began to take an interest in the brooch. Men came to their house, men who seemed dangerous in ways that Matthias couldn't articulate. They wanted to buy the brooch. They offered money.
His father refused them. He said the brooch was too valuable, too historically significant. He said he was going to donate it to the church so that it could be preserved and studied by scholars. Within a month of this announcement, his father was dead. The circumstances were unusual. His father was a healthy man, but he developed a fever that the physicians could not treat. He died hallucinating, speaking in languages that no one recognized, screaming about things that seemed to exist only in his mind. And when he died, the brooch was gone. No one knew what had happened to it. It had simply vanished, like it had never existed, like it had been a vision, a hallucination.
An artifact of collective imagination. Matthias's mother was left with no inheritance, no resources, and a son to care for. She was unable to manage. She placed Matthias in the monastery when he was 12 years old, as payment for the monks to educate and care for him. The monastery became Matthias's second home, and it was in the monastery that his apprenticeship in understanding cursed objects truly began. Because the monastery maintained a library of texts, Arabic texts, Hebrew texts, ancient Christian texts, that discussed curses, that explored the metaphysical mechanisms by which an object could be cursed, that documented historical instances of cursed items and the consequences of possessing them.
His first mentor was an elderly monk named Brother Anselm, a scholar of linguistics and philosophy who had spent 70 years studying the relationship between language, reality, and belief. Anselm taught Matthias that curses are not simply supernatural phenomena. They are social phenomena. They are belief systems that become self-fulfilling. If everyone believes that a thing is cursed, Anselm explained, then that thing becomes cursed. The curse exists in the collective mind of the community. It is as real as any physical force. But Anselm went further. He explained that curses can also be generated by the object itself, by the history embedded in the object.
A sword that has killed many people carries within it the weight of all those deaths, not supernaturally, but historically. If you pick up such a sword, you are picking up something that is laden with blood, with violence, with the accumulated suffering of those who died by its edge. Matthias learned that curses are fundamentally about narrative. They are stories that objects tell about themselves. And if you accept the story, if you accept the curse, then you are accepting a specific way of relating to that object. You are accepting that the object has power over you, that the object can shape your fate, that the object has agency in your life. Anselm died when Matthias was 25. The old monk had become one of Matthias's closest friends, one of the few people in the monastery with whom he could discuss ideas openly. And Anselm's death was, in its way, another kind of apprenticeship. It was the apprenticeship of loss, of understanding that knowledge does not protect you from death, that wisdom does not grant immunity from grief. After Anselm died, Matthias took on other mentors. Brother Edmund, who specialized in historical records, Brother Marcus, who was learning alchemy and the transformation of materials. Each mentor taught him something different, revealing another layer of understanding about how medieval people thought about cursed objects. His apprenticeship included a moment of profound doubt.
When he was 30, Matthias encountered a scholar visiting from another monastery, a man named Brother Franciscus, who had studied in the Islamic world and had learned their mathematical systems and their scientific methods. Franciscus was skeptical of curses. He argued that curses are superstitions, that they have no basis in reality.
that people who die seeking cursed treasures die from natural causes, illness, accidents, violence from other men, starvation, not from supernatural forces. Matthias found himself unable to refute Franciscus's argument. For weeks he questioned everything he had learned. He wondered whether Anselm had been wrong.
Whether the entire edifice of curse belief was simply a way of explaining natural phenomena using supernatural language. But then Matthias had a realization. The distinction between natural and supernatural might be a false distinction. Perhaps there is no difference between a curse that functions through supernatural means and a curse that functions through psychological influence and social pressure and the weight of historical narrative. If the end result is the same, if people die, if outcomes are negative, if consequences follow, then does the mechanism matter? This realization became the foundation of Matthias's mature understanding of curses. They are real, but not because they are supernatural.
They are real because they exist in the human consciousness, because they shape behavior, because they create expectations that tend to fulfill themselves, because belief becomes reality, because narrative becomes history, because stories become truth. When people ask whether Matthias believed the treasures were actually cursed, the answer is complicated. He believed that the narrative of curses was powerful. He believed that anyone who pursued these objects would be pursuing them with the expectation of failure, would be interpreting setbacks as signs of curse, would be experiencing the psychological burden of believing themselves cursed, and he believed that this psychological burden would be sufficient to cause actual harm.
That belief in curse was itself a kind of curse, a self-perpetuating cycle that would extract a toll from anyone who entered it. By copying the journal, by spreading the information about the 5 treasures, Matthias was essentially spreading a kind of contagion. He was transmitting not just information, but a whole belief system, a whole way of understanding and relating to certain objects. He was spreading curse itself. By the time Matthias reached his 60s, the physical toll of his life in the monastery had become severe. His hands had developed arthritis, the joints were swollen and stiff, his fingers were permanently bent at odd angles.
The act of writing, which had been his primary occupation for 40 years, had become painful. Not intermittently painful, but constantly painful. A persistent ache that never fully subsided, that could only be temporarily managed with herbs and prayer. His eyesight had continued to deteriorate. He was now nearly blind in one eye, the vision clouded by a cataract that had developed over the past decade. The other eye had better vision, but only when he was focusing on something very close to his face. Distance vision had become an approximation, a blurred interpretation of the world, a guessing game where he attempted to make sense of shapes and shadows. The spine was the worst.
Years of hunching over manuscript desks had permanently curved his spine. His back was shaped like a question mark, a shape that made simple movements difficult. Reaching upward was almost impossible. Bending downward required careful manipulation of joints that no longer cooperated smoothly. Walking had become a complex negotiation with his own body. His legs often developed sudden cramping pain, pain that would shoot from his lower back down through his thighs, causing him to pause, to take several deep breaths, to wait for the pain to subside before continuing. The pain would come without warning, would strike him in the corridor, in the chapel, in the library, and he would have to stop, had to wait.
Had to endure it. And yet Matthias continued to work. He continued to write, though more slowly now, though with more frequent breaks to rest his hands and eyes. He continued to study and research the 5 treasures, compiling notes and observations that he was planning to eventually compile into a comprehensive treatise on cursed objects in medieval belief. This was the challenge that occupied him.
Not the physical pain, though that was constant and limiting, but the intellectual and spiritual challenge of understanding what he had done. The challenge of accepting responsibility. The challenge of understanding that his action, the simple act of copying the journal, had set into motion a chain of events that had harmed people.
Had changed lives, had caused deaths. The physical toll was bearable because it was familiar. After 40 years of monastic life, pain had become his companion. It was a predictable part of his daily experience. He had learned how to accommodate it, how to work around it, how to maintain a degree of functionality despite its presence. But the spiritual toll was something different. It was a weight that grew heavier each year. Each time he learned of someone who had died seeking the treasures. Each time he heard a story of an expedition that had failed. Each time he heard a tale of someone whose life had been fundamentally altered by the pursuit of these objects. There was a particular case that haunted him.
A scholar named Dietrich, who had obtained a copy of the journal in 1375, some 25 years after Matthias had first transcribed it. Dietrich had become obsessed with the mirror of reflection. He had spent 15 years planning an expedition to Cordoba, gathering resources, assembling a team. But even before the expedition could begin, things started to go wrong. Dietrich's wife died in childbirth, a completely natural occurrence, but Dietrich interpreted it as the curse beginning to work. His eldest son became ill with a wasting disease, his body slowly consuming itself from the inside. His most trusted business partner betrayed him,
stealing the funds that Dietrich had assembled for the expedition. Through all of this, Dietrich did not abandon his quest. Instead, he interpreted each setback as confirmation that he was on the correct path, that the curse was trying to prevent him from achieving something important. He sold his remaining property. He took out loans that he could never repay. He gathered a final team of desperate men and set out for Cordoba with little more than the clothes on their backs. The expedition lasted 6 months. In that time, Dietrich's team suffered from disease, from attacks by brigands, from starvation and exhaustion. Dietrich himself became ill with a fever that would not break. He died in Cordoba, delirious.
Still talking about the mirror as he died, still believing that he was about to find it, still pursuing it even as his body shut down, even as consciousness faded. His team scattered. The mirror was never found. When Matthias learned of Dietrich's death, it struck him with the force of a physical blow. This was not just an abstract consequence of spreading information about cursed treasures. This was a specific man, a man whom Matthias had never met, but whom he felt intimately connected to. A man whose life and death could be traced in a direct line back to Matthias's decision to copy the journal. Matthias felt this weight in his body. He felt it in his aching joints, in his failing eyes, in his curved spine.
He experienced a kind of sympathetic suffering, as if Dietrich's agony had somehow been transmitted to him across the distance, across the years, entering into his own flesh, becoming part of his physical reality. This is what the challenge of spreading curse truly means. It is the recognition that information has consequences, that knowledge is not neutral, that simply sharing what you know can initiate consequences that extend far beyond your control, that extend into the future, that affect people you will never meet, that cause harm you will never fully understand. Matthias began to deny requests for copies of the journal. When scholars would write to him asking for information about the treasures, he would refuse.
When monks in other monasteries would inquire about the contents of the document, he would tell them the journal had been lost, destroyed, that he had no further knowledge of it. This was a lie, and it was not a lie. The journal had not been destroyed, but Matthias had effectively destroyed it in his own practice, by ceasing to circulate it, by ceasing to confirm or provide information about it, by attempting to contain the spread of information that had already spread too far to be contained. But the damage had already been done.
The journal had already been copied too many times. The information had spread too far. It was out in the world, and Matthias could not call it back, could not unknow the consequences of his actions.
Could not undo what had been done. The physical toll this took on him was immense. His health, which had been stable despite his various ailments, began to deteriorate. He developed a persistent cough. He became prone to fevers that would last for weeks. He lost weight, his already lean monastic frame becoming skeletal, his clothes hanging loose on his body, his strength declining with each month. The other monks believed he was dying. In his 60s, with a chronic cough and declining health, death seemed imminent. But Matthias did not die. Instead, he persisted, year after year, living with pain and illness, living with the weight of responsibility for consequences he could not undo, living with the knowledge that he had harmed people.
That he would continue to harm people, that his action would continue to have consequences long after his death. To understand how cursed treasures became part of medieval consciousness, we must understand how they functioned within the social fabric of medieval communities. These treasures were not private obsessions, they were public narratives, shared stories, collective beliefs that shaped how communities understood value, power, the relationship between ambition and consequence. In the monastery, Matthias's role was unique. He was the keeper of knowledge about these treasures. People would seek him out, asking questions, requesting information, trying to understand the legends.
Over time, his status within the monastery shifted. He ceased to be simply another monk. He became the expert, the scholar who understood curses, the man who could explain the mysteries. This status was complicated. Some monks regarded him with respect, seeking out his knowledge. Others regarded him with suspicion, believing that his extensive knowledge of curses indicated an unhealthy interest in dangerous things. The abbot walked a careful line, allowing Matthias to continue his research while subtly discouraging him from sharing information too openly. But outside the monastery, his reputation was different.
Through the networks of medieval scholarship, networks that connected monasteries, universities, courts, and the private collections of wealthy merchants, Matthias became known as the authoritative source on cursed treasures. His name was whispered in scholarly circles. His expertise was sought. His knowledge was valued. Consider Eleanor again. She is no longer the young woman who sent the journal to the monastery. She is now 91 years old. She has lived longer than anyone else mentioned in these stories. She has seen kingdoms rise and fall. She has watched the medieval world transform, watched the early stages of what would eventually become the Renaissance, the slow reassertion of classical learning,
the beginning of the end of medieval consciousness. But she has never forgotten her decision to hide her husband's journal in the monastery. She has never fully escaped the knowledge of what that decision set in motion. She has never fully forgiven herself for it. She has never moved beyond the guilt that accompanied the knowledge of what had happened, what continued to happen, what would keep happening. Eleanor had been a respected member of her community. She was a widow with property, with knowledge, with some influence among the merchant class. But after she sent the journal to the monastery, her social role changed. People began to avoid her. Not openly, not in ways that would be remarked upon, but subtly.
The other widows who had been her friends would have less time for her. Business partners would become less reliable. She understood, eventually, that she had become marked, not by curse, but by association. She was the woman who had sent the dangerous journal. She was the woman who had put the treasures back into circulation. If something went wrong in the community, if a merchant failed, if a young man died unexpectedly, if any kind of misfortune occurred, there was always a whisper of connection to Eleanor's decision. She was not actively blamed. Medieval people, despite their belief in curses, were not so naive as to imagine that Eleanor had directly caused every misfortune, but there was a kind of indirect blame.
A sense that she had introduced a dangerous element into the world, that her action had upset the balance, that she bore some responsibility for the negative consequences that followed. Eleanor's final years were spent in relative isolation. She retained her property, but she had few visitors. People were polite to her, but distant. She became something of a legend in her own lifetime, the woman who knew about the curses, the widow who had sent the dangerous journal, the woman who had, however unintentionally, unleashed a force that she could not control. And in this legend, Eleanor found a strange kind of meaning. If she was marked, if she was associated with the treasures, then at least her existence meant something.
She was no longer simply a woman whose husband had failed and whose life had been diminished by that failure. She was something more. She was part of a larger story, a story that would outlive her, a story that would continue to be told and retold long after her death. The social role of cursed treasure seekers within medieval communities was ambiguous. On one hand, these seekers were often regarded with disdain, seen as greedy men who were willing to risk everything for wealth. They were viewed as failures, men who did not have the stability or wisdom to be satisfied with their current condition. But, on another hand, they were also regarded with a strange kind of respect, even admiration. They were seen as men who were willing to test themselves against impossible odds, men who were brave enough or foolish enough to pursue something that others considered beyond reach, men who were willing to stake everything on their ambition, men who refused to accept the limitations that society had placed upon them. In a society where most people's lives were severely constrained by custom, by class, by the accident of birth, the treasure seeker represented a kind of freedom, the possibility of transformation, of elevating one's status, of escaping the limitations of one's birth. These possibilities were embodied in the treasure seeker, even for those who had no intention of actually seeking treasures themselves.
So even as communities mocked treasure seekers, even as they predicted failure and condemned ambition, there was also a vicarious investment in the seekers' quests. People wanted to believe that it was possible to find the treasures. They wanted to believe that wealth and power could be acquired through effort and cleverness and courage. They wanted to believe that transformation was possible, even if they themselves would never attempt it. The treasures became a kind of collective dream. They represented the possibility of transformation, even for those who had no intention of actually seeking them. They represented the hope that life could be different, that you could become different, that you could rise above your current circumstances, that you could achieve something impossible. This hope is what kept people pursuing the treasures, even when all evidence suggested that pursuit was futile. This hope is what kept people investing in expeditions, even when previous expeditions had failed. This hope is what drove people to sacrifice everything, to abandon everything, to pursue something that would probably kill them. Imagine yourself returning to the monastery where this story began. The year is now 1401, more than 50 years after Brother Matthias first copied the Journal of the Five Treasures. The monastery is quieter now. The number of monks has declined.
The scholarly work that once occupied the scriptorium has become less central to the monastery's function. The monks are aging. New monks are not coming. The world is changing. The medieval consciousness is beginning to fade. Something new is being born. Matthias is dead now, gone for 5 years, his body interred in the monastery's cemetery. His grave is unmarked because the monastery was no longer recording the deaths of individual monks with the careful documentation it once had. He is buried in the earth, his bones returning to the soil, his flesh becoming dust, his knowledge becoming memory, his memory becoming legend, but his presence lingers.
The knowledge that he accumulated over his lifetime, the research that he conducted, the careful notes that he took about the 5 treasures and the people who pursued them, all of this remains in the library, preserved in manuscripts and documents and bound volumes. These documents will survive centuries. They will be read by scholars hundreds of years in the future.
They will influence how people think about curses, about treasure, about the nature of human desire and human fear. You walk through the monastery as evening approaches. The sun is descending toward the horizon, painting the stone walls with gold and orange light. This light is temporary. It will last for perhaps 20 more minutes.
And then the autumn darkness will descend completely. The sun will sink below the horizon, and darkness will claim the world again. Feel the warmth of the evening light on your skin. Feel how the light warms your face, your arms, your body absorbs the light. The light carries heat. The heat is comforting. Soon this heat will be gone. Soon the cold will return. But for now, for these few precious minutes, there is warmth, there is light, there is comfort. The bells have rung for evening prayers, but you do not go to the chapel. Instead, you walk toward the library, moving through corridors that have become familiar over the course of this long night of listening. Your feet know the way now.
Your body has become accustomed to the weight of the story that you have been carrying. The stone walls guide you. The walls have guided countless feet over centuries. The walls are permanent. They will endure long after you are gone. The walls will stand when you are dust. The walls will remain when your name has been forgotten. The walls are the most permanent thing in this story. The library is dimly lit. There is a single candle burning. The light it casts is barely sufficient to navigate by. But you do not need much light. You are moving toward a particular manuscript, a manuscript that you somehow know is here, though you have never seen it before. You find it on a shelf, bound in leather that is soft and aged.
The leather has cracked in places. The cracks form patterns, lines that might be cracks or might be the natural aging of material. Its pages are yellowed and fragile, with centuries of existence. The pages will not last forever. Eventually, they will crumble. Eventually, all pages crumble. Eventually, all words are lost. This is Matthias's final compilation, the treatise on cursed objects that he spent his last years creating. It is a work that was never formally published, never distributed, never widely known. But it exists. It is here, waiting for someone to read it, waiting for you to read it. You open the manuscript carefully. The pages crackle under your fingers. The sound is soft, gentle, the sound of time and age and fragility.
The sound of something precious being handled. The sound of knowledge being transmitted from one person to another, from one time to another, from the past to the present, from the dead to the living. The handwriting is Matthias's handwriting, older and shakier than when he first copied the journal, but still readable, still clear in its intention, still communicating something important, still speaking to you across the centuries, still saying something that needs to be said. You read the opening lines. They are simple, direct, without the elaborate rhetoric that characterizes much medieval scholarship. I have spent my life trying to understand curses. I have read countless texts.
I have interviewed people who have sought the 5 treasures. I have corresponded with scholars across Europe. I have walked through ruins. I have stood in places where treasure seekers have died. I have felt the weight of their deaths. I have absorbed their sadness, their regret, their failed hope. And I have come to a conclusion that I fear is blasphemous. Curses are not supernatural. They are deeply, profoundly natural. They are the natural consequences of human desire meeting human limitation. They are what happens when we pursue something that we are not prepared to acquire. They are the price of transformation. They are the cost of reaching beyond ourselves.
Matthias describes each of the 5 treasures in detail. He explains the historical origins of the legends. He speculates about whether the treasures ever actually existed. And he concludes that it does not matter, that the legends themselves are more powerful than any physical object could be, that the power of the legend is real, that the consequences of the legend are real, that people die because of legends, that lives are changed because of stories. He writes about the expeditions that were launched to find the treasures. He documents the failures, the deaths, the broken dreams. He writes about Georg, whose attempted expedition to find the mirror of reflection ended in madness. Georg spent the last decade of his life painting, creating elaborate landscapes that seemed to depict places that did not exist, visions that seemed to come from the cursed mirror itself, transmitted backward through time and space, showing him what the mirror would have shown him if he had ever found it. Matthias describes Brother Anselm, his original mentor, and the lessons that Anselm taught about the relationship between belief and reality. He reflects on whether he himself is cursed, whether the act of copying the journal and spreading its information has somehow subjected him to the same curse that affects everyone else who becomes involved with the treasures, whether his deteriorating health, his failing body, his persistent pain, are all signs of the curse working through him, affecting him, marking him as one of the treasure's victims. And then, in the final pages, Matthias writes something unexpected. He writes a kind of apology, addressed to no one in particular, to everyone, to the future, to you. I do not expect forgiveness. I do not deserve it. I set information into circulation that changed the lives of countless people. Some of them are dead because of that information. Others are alive but fundamentally altered, marked by the pursuit of something they could not obtain. I did this because I was curious. I did this because I believed that knowledge should be shared. I did this because I was young and did not understand the consequences of my actions.
But I have come to understand something that gives me a small degree of peace, a small degree of comfort, something that allows me to accept my guilt while not being completely consumed by it. The information about the treasures did not create the desire for them. The desire existed long before the information. There are always people who will be drawn to pursue impossible things, who will be willing to sacrifice everything for the possibility of transformation. The treasures are not the cause of this desire. They are the expression of it. They are the form that the desire takes in the medieval imagination. If I had not copied the journal, if I had not spread the information, this desire would have found another form.
It would have latched on to another myth, another legend, another promise of transformation. The human drive to test ourselves against impossible odds is fundamental. It cannot be eliminated through secrecy or silence. It can only be acknowledged, honored, and warned against. I have learned that information is neither good nor evil. It simply is. Information exists in the world, and once it exists, it cannot be unknown. It cannot be suppressed. It can only be acknowledged and accepted. What I should have done, what I wish I had done, was not to refuse to copy the journal, but to copy it with caution, with warning, with an explicit acknowledgement that the pursuit of these treasures would likely result in tragedy.
That the pursuit would cost more than it would give, that ambition, while admirable, must be tempered with wisdom. But I was young. I did not have this wisdom. I did not understand the power of information. I did not understand that sharing knowledge is not a neutral act, that sharing knowledge means you accept responsibility for the consequences of that knowledge. This is my confession. This is my understanding. This is my attempt at wisdom. Too late, too little, but offered nonetheless. To whoever reads this, know that the treasures are still out there. Not in the physical world, perhaps, but in the human imagination. There are always treasures waiting to be pursued.
There are always impossible things calling to those who are ambitious enough to hear their call. Be cautious. Be wise. Test yourself against impossible odds if you must. But do so with your eyes open, knowing the cost, accepting the consequences. understanding that transformation requires sacrifice, and that the sacrifice may be greater than you can bear. Sleep now. Rest. Know that history continues its gentle rhythm. Know that others before you have pursued these treasures. Know that others after you will pursue them. Know that you are part of a long chain of human striving, of human ambition, of human desire to become more than we are. And know that this is enough. This is human.
This is what makes us who we are. As you read these final words, you become aware that the sun has completed its descent below the horizon. The library is now illuminated only by candlelight, a small circle of warm light in an infinity of darkness. The manuscript lies in your hands. The words settle into your mind. They take root. They begin to mean something. They begin to change how you understand yourself. The world outside the monastery has changed. Medieval Europe is beginning to transition. The early stages of transformation that will become the Renaissance are underway. New knowledge is arriving from the Islamic world. The printing press is being developed. The age of exploration is about to begin.
Not through wise foresight, not through committees and studies and rational design, through crisis, response, improvisation, and accidental permanence, through people under pressure making desperate decisions that happen to work just barely well enough to survive the immediate problem. And then time passes, the crisis fades, the emergency becomes history, but the fix remains, no longer questioned, no longer justified, simply how we've always done it. You think about all the medieval emergencies that created modern systems. Quarantine, keeping ships offshore until disease revealed itself or didn't. Bureaucracy, documenting reality so disputes could be resolved with records instead of violence.
Burning the last of its wax, the monastery is settling into the rhythms of evening, the necessary and eternal patterns of prayer and rest and prayer again. You walk back through the corridors. Your feet are slow. Your body has become heavy with the weight of this long night. You have carried the stories with you. Brother Matthias and his trembling hands. Brother Augustine and his contemplation of death. George and his failed expedition. Eleanor and her isolation. The 5 treasures themselves with their terrible promises and certain disappointments. You are no longer in the monastery, though the monastery remains with you. You are returning to your own time, your own place, your own bed, carrying these medieval stories with you into sleep.
They will stay with you. They will shape your dreams. They will inform how you understand desire, how you understand ambition, how you understand the cost of pursuing the impossible. Your breathing has become slow and deep. Each breath is a kind of anchor, connecting you to the present moment, to your own body, to the comfort and safety of wherever you are right now. In, slowly. Hold it. Out, slowly. Feel the breath moving through your body. Feel your chest rising, falling, rising, falling. The rhythm is steady. The rhythm is ancient. This is the rhythm of life itself, the rhythm of all living things, the rhythm that connects you to every person who has ever lived, to every person in this story.
To every treasure seeker who has ever pursued the impossible. The medieval world is retreating now. The candlelight is fading. The stone corridors are growing more distant. The voices of the monks are becoming quieter, merging into a kind of white noise, a background hum that is soothing and inevitable. You can allow your eyes to close now. You can allow the distinction between waking and sleeping to blur and dissolve. The story has been told. The treasures have been described. The people who pursued them have been honored and acknowledged and mourned. Your body is becoming heavier with each breath. Your mind is becoming softer, more open.
less concerned with maintaining the boundaries between self and other, between real and imagined.
Not because anyone planned this magnificent infrastructure, because enough emergencies forced enough desperate solutions that accidentally worked, and working solutions are too valuable to question, even when they're based on medieval guessing and historical panic. Somewhere, centuries in the future, people will live inside these systems without knowing their origins. They will complain about bureaucracy requiring documentation. They will resent quarantine delays. They will find fire codes restrictive. They will consider sanitation and hospitals and standard time and visible authority to be obvious necessities that have always existed. They will never know they're living inside emergency fixes.
The shadows are deepening into complete darkness. But the darkness is warm. The darkness is safe. The darkness is familiar. Your body is now completely relaxed. Every muscle, every fiber, complete relaxation, complete surrender to the weight of gravity, to the support of the bed beneath you, to the safety of being held by something larger than yourself. Your mind is quiet now. The thoughts have slowed. The worries have faded. There is nothing left but the rhythm of breathing. In, out, in, out. The ancient rhythm, the rhythm of life itself.
And so, like the medieval treasure hunter after a long day of fruitless searching, like the monk after completing his daily prayers, like the merchant returning home from a failed expedition, like Matthias in his final years finding peace in acceptance, like Eleanor in her isolation finding meaning in legend, like George in his madness finding truth in visions, you too can rest now. You too can allow yourself to surrender to sleep. Your body is relaxed, your mind is quiet, the world is soft and forgiving. You are no longer afraid of curses. You understand now that curses are simply stories, powerful stories, stories that shape reality through the force of belief and expectation. And stories are not dangerous, they are gifts.
They are ways of understanding ourselves, ways of exploring what it means to be human, ways of honoring the fundamental drives and desires that make us who we are. The treasures are hidden now. They are no longer calling out. They have retreated back into the medieval past, back into the imagination of monks and merchants and explorers who are now 500 years gone. They are safely stored in the chambers of history, preserved in documents and manuscripts and stories, protected by time and distance. And you are here, and you are safe, and it is time to rest. The monastery is gone, the candlelight is gone, the shadows have dissolved into complete darkness, and in this darkness you find peace, you find comfort.
You find the safety of unconsciousness, the safety of sleep, the safety of surrender. Sleep now. Your eyelids are heavy, your thoughts are dissolving. Your body is sinking deeper into the bed, deeper into rest, deeper into the safety of unconsciousness. Sleep well. Dream of medieval monasteries and candlelight and stone walls and the gentle weight of history. Dream of treasures hidden and dreams pursued and the price of ambition. Dream of the stories that make us human. Dream of the curses we accept. Dream of the peace that comes from surrender. Sleep now. Sleep deeply. Sleep peacefully. And when you wake, carry these stories with you. Let them inform how you understand the world. Let them shape how you pursue your own ambitions.
Let them remind you that transformation has a cost, that knowledge has consequences, that the pursuit of the impossible is both beautiful and terrible. Sleep well. Please like and subscribe our channel.